Hello, Montana. Hello, academic world questers, and hello, world. It's Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council, and this is Connect Montana, where we bring the world to Montana and Montana to the world. For the past 2 months, we've had a series of Connect Montana webcasts focusing on the topics for this spring's Academic World Quest. Academic World Quest is a 3-day global education conference that brings the best and the brightest Montana high school students from around the state into Missoula for a 3-day engagement and discussion on a full range of international issues. These days are then capped off by a knowledge competition where teams from around the state vie to represent Montana in the national competition. Now, of course, this year in March, our competition and our entire conference will be held virtually, as will the national conference. But to help our students around Montana get ready for the competition, we're having this series where we're looking at the topics that will be on the competition and trying to help them by bringing experts onto the show to talk to us and to the students so that they are ready. Of course, these shows cannot take place without the generous support of our sponsors. So sincere thanks to the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, and Stockman Bank. Now let me welcome tonight's guest. Ellie Bundy was born and raised on the Flathead Indian Reservation, having lived most of her life in St. Ignatius. She currently serves on the CSKT Tribal Council as a representative for the St. Ignatius District. Prior to taking a council seat, she served as the development director for the SKC Foundation. Other roles at SKC included Director of Scholarship Acquisition and Distribution, Director of Career Services, Campus Emergency Response Team, Behavioral Intervention Team, and Title IX Investigations. She's alumni of SKC, having earned degrees in office professions, information technology, business administration, entrepreneurship, emergency services, and hazardous materials and environmental remediation. Whew, that's a lot of study. Ellie served as a board commissioner for the Salish Kootenai Housing Authority and a utility board member for Mission Valley Power. She currently serves on Attorney General Tim Fox's Missing Indigenous Persons Task Force and the ICSKT Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Working Group. She's an active member of the St. Ignatius Volunteer Fire Department and serves as their secretary and as board trustee. Ellie has 2 beautiful children, Shaquille and Zane, and 2 amazing grandsons, James and Eli. Ellie, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Chris.
Ellie, that's quite an extraordinary biography. I'm wondering if you have any time at all, any day to do anything but, work, and take care. It's quite extraordinary.
I don't have time. I love what I do, though, so it's good to stay busy.
Ellie, thank you so much for coming on. Now, I wonder if I could just ask you to say a few words to our audience to kind of bring us into this issue a little bit, because we're looking at 2 things. We're looking at one element of international human trafficking, but it has a very important, more local and regional element in the missing and murdered Indigenous people movement that you've been such a critical part of. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about those 2 things and their interplay. Over to you, Ellie.
So my role has been first being involved with the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement, of course, and then in doing that work, it was apparent that trafficking plays a piece in that some of the women who go missing may very well be in the sex trafficking trade. And so it's only been recently since I've started learning more about human trafficking and doing research myself and trying to see how those 2 are related and what we can do to help the issue on both fronts.
So Ellie, I mean, I was, for these shows, a great thing for me is I'm also having to do some research and trying to understand the issue a little bit, and maybe just to share a few numbers with you. And these are the global and international numbers. And maybe you could give us some idea of, how that relates to the situation here in Montana and regionally. But the International Labor Organization estimates that anywhere between 20 and 40 million people are trafficked each year. And that includes, you can be trafficked for use as labor, as prostitution, and sexual slavery, and organ donation. Of that 20 to 40 million, 50,000 people are trafficked into the United States each year. And interestingly for me, they said that 0.04% of all cases are detected. So it's a remarkably low number of people and cases which kind of are resolved. All of this is somehow resulting in a $150 billion international illegal economy that is based on this human trafficking. So I found those numbers to be very large, and kind of hard to get my head around. And just one more quickly, of that number, nearly 5 million are trafficked for sex and prostitution. And of those, 1 million are children, under the age of 16. So, Ellie, can you tell us a little bit now? I mean, your reaction to those numbers, and then kind of maybe bring us in a little bit on what's happening here in Montana.
That is a part of my presentation, Chris, so I do have it in a slide that's
great.
coming up in a bit, but.
Excellent. So why don't we go straight ahead into your presentation?
Okay, may I share my screen?
Yeah, I think are you co-hosted? Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay, so I'd first like to start by giving you faces to put, instead of just being aware of numbers, I want you to know who these people are. So meet Jermaine, also known to many as Liz, a beautiful young lady from Dixon, Montana, located on the Flathead Indian Reservation, where she's an enrolled member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes. She is a mother to 2 young boys. She's a daughter, a granddaughter, a niece, and a friend. She was due to begin planting trees for CSKT on Monday, June 18th, 2018, a job she had done regularly in past years. She was also looking forward to her first summer of fighting wildfires. Jermaine was last seen at 1 a.m. by security cameras walking down an alley in Missoula, Montana. She was only 23 years old when she vanished. The theories of Jermaine's disappearance include sex trafficking, which could have taken her anywhere in the world. Next, I'd like you to meet Ashley. Ashley loved riding horses, a skill she learned growing up on a ranch near Heart Butte, Montana, located on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. In high school, she was very active, participating in track and volleyball. After graduating high school in 2015, she attended Blackfeet Community College. She was interested in pursuing forestry, and she had a plan to transfer to the U of M in the fall of 2017. Ashley was last seen in a video clip from a house party where she sat on a sofa amongst others who were drinking and visiting in June of 2017. Many rumors and false leads have been pursued to no avail. The family indicated that law enforcement officials failed to respond immediately, stating she's of age, she can leave when she wants to. She was 20 years old when she vanished. Selena Not Afraid is a member of the Crow tribe. She loved horses, beading, sewing, baking, and being with family and friends. She loved her horse and was practicing to be a future ladies Indian relay race riding champion. She was also active in basketball and volleyball. Recently, Selena returned to dancing jingle dress at powwows, something her and her sister did together. Selena went missing on January 1st of this year and was later found deceased less than a mile from where she was left by friends at a rest area off Interstate 90, a busy highway between Billings and Hardin near the Crow Reservation. She was 16 years old. Authorities have indicated she died of hypothermia based on results from her autopsy, a finding that many continue to question. Hannah was a member of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. She was a mother to a new young son. She was a daughter, a sister, and a granddaughter. She was last seen when she left home to drink and watch fireworks with friends on July 4th, 2013. When her car was found on the side of the road with 2 flat tires and she was nowhere in sight, her family knew something was wrong. Because the police didn't take her disappearance seriously, however, Hannah's disappearance would go almost unnoticed until her body was found at the rodeo grounds on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation on July 8th. By that time, her body was already significantly decomposed. Although her clothes were partially removed, it couldn't even be definitively proven that she had been sexually assaulted, though the two people charged in connection with what happened to her would later admit that rape was involved. When she tried to defend herself against the rape, the couple beat her to death. She was 21 years old. And finally, Savannah LaFontaine Graywind. She was a member of the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe and was excited to start her life. At 22, she had just moved into her own apartment in Fargo, North Dakota with her boyfriend, and they were looking forward to welcoming their first child in September. She had recently started working as a nursing assistant, hoping to fully qualify as a nurse specializing in elder care. She was 8 months pregnant when she was abducted and killed, and her body dumped in a river. Her child was born during the abduction and survived. A couple who lived in the same apartment building were charged in her death and are now serving life in prison. So now that you know some of the names, let's talk numbers. On some reservations, Indian women are murdered at more than 10 times the national average. 84% of Indigenous women have experienced physical, sexual, or psychological violence in their lifetime. And although Indigenous people make up 6.5% of the overall state population, they are 4 times more likely to go missing in Montana. An average of 26% of the missing persons entered in the Montana Missing Persons Clearinghouse are Native American. And Montana is known to be among the top 5 states for missing and murdered Indigenous women. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Movement, and I will often refer to it as MMIP now, MMIP, our local task force recognizes people and not just women. It's garnered significant media attention over the past several years. So the term itself indicates that the majority of missing and murdered are adult females. A Montana Department of Justice data analysis project conducted in the spring of 2020 provides several key observations. Males go missing at a rate almost equal to females, hence the MMIP. Native Americans are disproportionately represented among the missing, and nearly 80% of the individuals that went missing between 2017 and 2019 were juveniles under the age of 18. The MMIW movement in the state has increased significantly over the past 3 years, but young women from Indian reservations continue to disappear, often with no answers as to how, why, or where they went. Montana is a sacred home for 8 federally recognized tribes. Each tribal community, including those in urban areas, has suffered the loss of tribal members who have gone missing and never been found. In January 2019, the CSKT tribes of the Flathead Reservation passed a resolution establishing a work group to address the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. With that resolution, we'd hope to support pending legislation at state and federal levels, provide education and awareness for young people regarding safety and sex trafficking, provide awareness to the community on MMIP and its correlation to domestic and sexual abuse, runaways, drug activity, and sex trafficking. We want to collaborate with grassroots MMIP organizations and groups, find innovative ways to intervene in violence to women, and provide resources and services for families of missing women, such as search assistance, cost of gas, food, cadaver dogs, assistance navigating through the investigative process, and finding closure after missing loved ones are found. And finally, to provide statewide outreach to other tribes and organizations. The state of Montana began focusing on missing and murdered Indigenous women during the 2017-18 legislative session, when the State Tribal Relations Interim Committee requested information on human trafficking, violence against women, and missing persons. Several proposals were developed over the last 2 years. The bills that have passed, House Bill 54, which addresses law enforcement reporting requirements, House Bill 20, which mandates reporting in certain custodial interference cases, House Bill 21, which is known as HANNA's Act, named after HANNA that we met earlier, Senate Bill 312, which is the LINK Act, that's the Linking in Native Communities project, and then it created the state MIP task force. And then Senate Bill 227 is Savannah's Act, and that's in That's for Savannah, who we also met earlier. And then Senate Bill 982, the Not Invisible Act. And because of the amount of information I'm cramming in here in 15 minutes, I'm going to not talk about these specifically, but just know that they're ones that you want to research in the future. The one thing I do want to mention about Senate 312, the Looping in Native Communities Network Grant Program, there was a $25,000 grant that was given out to a tribal college, and Blackfeet Community College was the grant recipient for that. And with that funding, they created a reporting system that will eventually include all 8 tribes. CSKT is scheduled to be the second added to the network behind Blackfeet. And so you can visit that site at mmipmt.com. In November of 2019, President Trump signed an executive order creating the Presidential Task Force on Missing and Murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. The task force, designated Operation Lady Justice, convened listening sessions and consultations with tribal leaders and citizens on the scope and nature of the issues. And they will be developing model protocols and procedures to apply to new and unsolved cases. They've established a multidisciplinary, multi-jurisdictional team to review cold cases, and they will be addressing the needs for greater clarity regarding the roles, authorities, jurisdictions throughout the life cycle of these cases. I'm just going backwards. So these photos are from a visit made to the Flathead Reservation. Attorney General Barr came and announced that they would be launching a national strategy to address the issue of missing and murdered Native Americans. It provided $1.5 million in funding to place missing and murdered Indigenous person coordinators, U.S. attorneys' offices in 11 states. Montana was included in those states, to develop protocols for a more coordinated law enforcement response to the missing cases. And the plan also included deploying the FBI's most advanced response capabilities when requested, and improves data collection and analysis, and provides training to support local response efforts. And more on Savannah's Act. I'm going to skip over that for now. So the attorney for Montana, Kurt Almy, is the one that was appointed. And so he's been in communications with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes. He was at CSKT last week and announced the pilot project that we're going to be a part of to create a tribal community response plan that will target MMIP cases. So CSKT is the first in the nation to work on this plan, which could set the model for dealing with a nationwide crisis around MMIP. And we actually have our first meetings happening tomorrow and Thursday. So looking forward to that opportunity. So somebody's daughter, this is just something I wanted to draw your attention to. Had I more time, I would share a trailer with you, but this is a video worth watching to learn more about murdered and missing in Montana. Very powerful. It can be found on YouTube. So I just wanted to share this as another resource for you to check out when you have more time. So human trafficking, which is modern day slavery. And I think this is a slide that you will never be able to forget. It's the statistics that haunt me. 89% of people in prostitution want to escape, but they don't have any other options for survival. 30% of men have paid for sex in their lifetime. 34 children are lost to traffickers every hour in the United States. 34 children. 13 is the average age of a young girl entering prostitution, while it's 12 for a young boy. 15 is the number of times the average sex trafficking victim is sold in a single night. $90 is the average price of a human slave today. 50,000 is the average number of times a human trafficking victim will be sold by the time she is 21 years old. That to me is the most staggering, heart-wrenching statistic out of all of them. 50,000 times. It's heartbreaking. So sex trafficking defined. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for a commercial sex act in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. Labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for a labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt servitude, bondage, or slavery. And some of the popular industries include those on the left: agriculture, forestry, logging, hospitality, janitorial, construction, illicit drug production or sales. So know this: anyone can be trafficked and anyone can be a trafficker. That's really important. It's not all about poverty levels or ethnicities. Anyone can be trafficked, anyone can be a trafficker. It is, as you mentioned earlier, a $150 billion industry, second only to drug trafficking. So just a slide on what is force, fraud, and coercion. Force can include physical assault, sexual assault or rape, physical confinement or isolation. Fraud can be fraudulent employment offers, false promises about work conditions or living conditions, or withholding wages. Coercion could be a threat to life, safety, a threat to family members or others, threats of deportation or arrest, debt bondage or withholding legal documents, or psychological manipulation, which could include blackmail. So some of the recruitment methods, the common ones, are meeting the basic needs of a person, whether that be food, clothing, or shelter. It could be a promise of romance, love, or acceptance. It could include flattery, lies, and manipulation, and exploitation of a position of authority, offers of independence, luxury items, or cash. And it's really all about exploiting the vulnerabilities or desperations of those in certain situations at certain times. So other facts that may surprise you: transportation is not required, physical force or restraint is not required, initial consent does not matter, wages earned does not void the crime, trafficking victims can be men, women, or children, not all victims are minors, and prior work history does not matter. 30,000 victims of sex trafficking die each year from abuse, disease, torture, and neglect. Another heart-wrenching statistic. So what are the signs to watch for? Trafficking is often a crime that's hidden in plain sight. So here are just some things to watch for. A person may appear malnourished. They may show signs of physical injuries and abuse. They may avoid eye contact, social interaction, and authority figures such as law enforcement. They may seem to adhere to scripted or rehearsed responses in social interactions. They lack official identification documents, appear destitute, lacking personal possessions. They may be working excessively long hours or living at their place of employment. They may check in often to hotels or motels with older males and often refer to them as boyfriends or daddies, which is often street slang for pimp. They may have poor physical or dental health. You may see tattoos or branding on the neck and or lower back. They may have untreated sexually transmitted diseases. It might be something like small children serving in a family restaurant. Security measures that appear to keep people inside an establishment, like barbed wire inside of a fence or bars covering the insides of windows, or just not allowing people to go into public alone or speak for themselves. Protect yourself. Be aware of your internet presence. Don't share personal information. Don't share photos you wouldn't want made public. Be cautious on dating apps and social media. Let a trusted friend know if you plan to meet someone in person. Meet new people in public places. Do your research on job offers that seem too good to be true. And most importantly, trust your instincts. So how can you help? Learn the indicators of human trafficking so you can help identify potential victims. If you're in the United States and believe someone may be a victim, report your suspicions by calling 911 or call the 24-hour hotline at 888-373-7888. Be a conscientious and informed consumer. Discover your slavery footprint. Ask who picked your tomatoes or made your clothes, or check with the Department of Labor's list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor. Encourage companies to take steps to investigate and prevent human trafficking in their supply chains and publish the information for consumer awareness. Volunteer and support anti-trafficking efforts in your community. Meet with or write with your elected officials to let them know that you care about combating human trafficking, and ask what they are doing to address it. Host an awareness event to watch and discuss films about human trafficking. For example, learn how modern day slavery exists today. Watch an investigative documentary about sex trafficking, or discover how human trafficking can affect global food supply chains. Also, check out CNN's Freedom Project for more stories on the different forms of human trafficking around the world. Organize fundraisers and donate those proceeds to anti-trafficking organizations. Encourage local schools to partner with students and include modern slavery in their curriculum. As a parent, educator, or school administrator, be aware of how traffickers target school-aged children. Support a victim service provider. And if you own a business, provide jobs and internships, skills training, and other opportunities to trafficking survivors. And students, most importantly, take action. Join or establish a club to raise awareness about human trafficking and initiate action throughout your local community. Consider doing one of your research papers on a topic concerning human trafficking. So that is all I have. If there are any questions, if we have time for questions.
Ellie, thank you very much for that. Maybe you could stop sharing your screen. There we go. Perfect. Excellent. Ellie, I mean, first, I just want to thank you and say, of course, you know, it's very shocking. Not just, you know, the I guess the numbers speak for themselves in their shock, but that this is such a part of our society and our communities. I mean, when you talk about $150 billion, it's not a small thing that is living off in the corners. It's you know, quite shocking, I think, for many of us to see the extent of the problem. We have a number of questions that have been chatted in while you were doing your presentation, Ellie. So I'm just going to go into the chat box, and I'll just remind participants, please chat in if you have questions to Ellie. We don't have a lot of time. I've also in the chat box put in the website from Ellie's presentation and a link to the trailer for Somebody's Daughter. This event will be it's being recorded and will be on YouTube. So if you missed anything that Ellie said, you can go back and look at it later. Ellie, you did mention a little bit about federal government engagement here with some of the pictures. But I think a slightly different question: to what extent has the federal government been helpful in your work in MMIP?
I feel like it's been really good since Bar came to the tribe. You know, Kurt Almy has been amazing. I feel like the lines of communication are open. I feel like it's been a really respectful relationship. And as I mentioned, those meetings that we're beginning tomorrow speak volumes, I think, to the effort that they're trying to make. So hopefully good things come out of that tribal community response plan for all of our Indigenous communities.
Just to participant Marcy, I think your question was answered there. Ellie had some slides on what we can do. Here's another question. In your opinion, Ellie, how successful has law enforcement been in the battle in the US and Montana? And maybe not in that question, but I'll add, it's interesting in your slides that there's a range of ways to do this. You know, you've got legislation, you've got community action, and you also have law enforcement and a number of others. This question particularly on law enforcement and your views.
That's a tough question for a couple of reasons. I feel like on our reservation, we are so fortunate. Our tribal police are phenomenal. They've been active on our MMIP work group from day one. And so I know a lot of other reservations don't have that. A lot of other reservations do have jurisdictional issues with the BIA and lack of trained law enforcement, lack of the correct number of law enforcement needed to be able to respond accordingly. So I think we're really blessed to have the law enforcement team that we do, and that they do have such a strong relationship with other law enforcement agencies in our surrounding area. So hopeful that that our guys can, they're participating in these meetings this week too, that and they're willing to share with others. So I hope that helps others as well, their participation.
Well, it sounds like you're a bit on the leading edge of a number of these things. And so, I mean, I also, wish you well and hope that bodes well for all of these cases. I'd like to just ask you one more question, Ellie. This is, I think we have time for one more, but it's kind of the big question. The numbers, the stories, and meeting the women that were in your presentation today, all of these have a pretty deep impact on anybody listening to you tonight. But the further you get away from this event and the women and these numbers, the less you might feel the impact of this on our community. So I wonder if you could just bring this home to us, Ellie. What is the impact of this on Montana communities, both Indigenous communities and others around the state?
It's a huge issue. It's like I mentioned in the introduction of those young ladies, they're not just numbers. And we're going to see those numbers over and over again when we hear different presentations, but they're not just numbers. They are people's daughters, their granddaughters, they're our family. And I'll just share one thing that got me super involved when they first started doing legislation for the MMIP task force at CSKT. I wasn't yet a tribal member, so I was attending a community meeting, and one of our drug task force guys was talking about one of the young ladies, Ashley, and about a rumor that he had heard, or that law enforcement received this tip, that Ashley may have been seen in Othello, Washington. Someone reported that there were girls in a trailer hooked up to IV drip lines with heroin going into their systems, and they were being sold to the local migrant workers for $10 to do whatever they wanted with. That haunted me, absolutely haunts me. That could have been my daughter. That could have been my sister. And so I hope that's what people remember. They're not just numbers. Those could be our family members, and they're people in our community. And so if nothing else from this presentation tonight, just remember those beautiful girls and children and the men and just as community members. So I hope that addresses your question.
It does indeed. And to be sure, Ellie, I don't think any of us are going to be able to forget that. I want to thank you very much for your presentation on, it's a very difficult and deeply emotional issue, and with deep impact, not just in Indigenous communities, not just in Montana, but around the country and around the world, as you have told us here tonight. So sincere thanks to you, Ellie, for bringing this to the audience tonight, and also to those Montana students who are preparing for academic WorldQuest. Know that these students are all around this state. They're on reservations, they're in remote and rural areas as well, and we're all impacted by this very important issue. And thank you for your work on this as well, Ellie. Much appreciated. So let me then also thank the audience who's come on tonight. Really appreciate you all joining the show. Special thanks again to our sponsors at the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Stockman Bank, and Allegiance. So this one wraps up our academic WorldQuest preparation series. We're going to have a short break from Connect Montana, coming back again after the new year with a whole new series of interesting things, and looking at those issues that matter to the world, but also matter to Montana and Montanans, exactly like Ellie's presentation tonight. I want to make one last word here to those people who are members and are watching. If you are a member of the Montana World Affairs Council, don't forget that we have our membership appreciation night next Thursday, 6:45 to 8 o'clock. And so please join us. You can find the information on your email and coming to you by mail. So once again, thank you, Ellie. Thank you to our audience. Thank you, academic WorldQuesters. Thanks to our generous donors to make all of this happen. I wish you all well and have a good night.
Norway, and also the sudden increase.
The UN Truth Supervision